120 marks, 6 cases, 1500 words. This is the larger half of the paper and the half where most candidates last most. The first video gave you the method and the clock. The second video gave you the thinkers and the vocabulary of public administration. This one puts both to work on the only question that finally matters. Faced with this situation, what would you do and why? 4 things carry forward. I will name them rather than assume them. Carried forward. The first thing is section B, 6 cases, 20 marks, 250 words, about 13 minutes each, 2 to 4 subsections. So 60 to 120 by 125 words apart. The second thing, not every subquestion asks you to decide. 4 other types: persuasion, domain measures, diagnostic, zoom out. 3, an ethical issues is a tension between two legitimate claims, not a list of virtues. 10 conflicts recurring like law, ethics, rules, conscience, efficiency, fairness, objectivity, compassion, personal, public, transparency, confidentiality, loyalty, integrity, national to global, development to environment, means and ends. And 4, discretion is judgment inside a power the rule confers for reasons you can state. Arbitrariness is judgment without it. And one idea from the thinkers unit that this video uses by name. Aristotle's Epikeia, equity as the correction of a law where law being general fails a particular case. That is the classical name for the hardest situation this paper sets, where the compassionate option is unlawful and the lawful option is cruel. We will meet it. Everything else you need in this video. We begin with the engine, that is the case study engine. Case study engine. What is the case study and what is the case study engine? I told you 120 marks, 6 cases, 1500 words, and half of the paper where most candidates lost most. The reason is not that they lack values, it is that they have no system. They read a page of specific detail: a bank, a landslide, a brother's tender, a border at midnight, panic at the specificity, and write a moral essay instead of an administrative decision. The examiner reads 400 of those a day and can tell in 2 lines. This unit gives you 1 engine, not 3. If you have collected competing step sequences from different sources, discard them now and keep this. Under the clock, a candidate with 1 engine writes a candidate with 3 chooses. Everything in unit level, the archetypes, is the engine with the weighting changed. So what is the engine? Role and decision to stakeholders, to then conflicts, then options, then legal or ethical or workable, and owned choice plus systemic fix. So step 1, what is the step 1 as far as case studies is concerned? Read for structure, not story. On the first read, strip the narrative to three things. Who am I? The role decides your powers and duties. A district magistrate, a superintendent of police, a junior officer, and a chief executive have entirely different options in the same situation. What exactly must I decide? Not the whole situation, the precise decision point, and what is the clock. Immediate crisis are considered decision because that changes everything below. Underline the decision point. Most strong answers are competent answers to a problem that case did not ask about. Second one, step number two, that is map the stakeholders. What is the first step? First step is a role and decision. In the role and decision, who am I? What exactly must I decide? And what is the clock? And the second one is stakeholders. Map the stakeholders, everyone affected and what each stands to gain or loss. The marks for identify the ethical issues come largely from seeing the stakeholders others miss, and they are almost always the silent ones. The public whose money is being spent, the honest competitor who loses the tender, the next officer who inherits the precedent you set, the institution itself, the vulnerable third party who is not in the room and cannot speak for themselves. And one stakeholder, candidates routinely forget: the accused. Even a person who appears plainly corrupt is entitled to inquiry rather than trial by leaked video. An answer that convicts on the strength of the cases narrative has failed a test. It did not just notice it was taken. So, in the stakeholder, everyone affected, especially the silent ones. And step three, name the ethical issues as conflicts, not labels. So, this is where most answers die. And Unit 7 gave you the discipline. Weak answers lists virtues: integrity, honesty, accountability, and transparency. Those are things you are in favor of. Strong answers name the collision, duty to act on credible evidence against the risk of becoming an instrument of partisan politics, legality against compassion, public interest against career safety, immediate relief against procedural correctness. So, the real and strong answer should be name the collision rather than list the virtues. So, that is the thing you have to understand from this particular phenomenon, that is conflicts, that is step 3. So an ethical issue is a tension between legitimate claims. State it that way and use the 10 recurring conflicts from unit 7 as your diagnostic. When you read an unfamiliar case, your first question is which two of those 10 are colliding. We discussed in the unit number 7, that is regarding collisions. Those are law, those are what? Those are law and ethics, etc. etc. Then what is the step 4? Lay out the realistic options. Lay out the realistic options. Usually 3, occasionally 4, and they should span the honest range. The compliant but cowardly option. The compliant but cowardly option. Like go along, stay safe, Comes to the rigid option, act strictly by the book regardless of the human consequence. And the considered option, like principled and also workable. The compliant but cowardly option, the rigid option, and the considered option. So name all three fairly, including the ones you will reject. An examiner can see when an option has been set up only to be knocked down. So you have to avoid two traps. That is the fantasy option. No real case has a cost-free perfect choice. And inventing one shows you did not understand the case. And the second one, the false binary. Resign or surrender. Almost every good answer finds a defensible middle that is principled and survivable. So, fifth one step, that is a triple test. What is triple test? Judge every option on three axes. Is it legal? Is it ethical? Is it workable? And in the public interest? This is your scoring engine. It stops you choosing an option that is noble but impossible, or efficient but wrong. Show the merit and the demerit of each honestly. Even the option you reject gets a fair hearing. Because that is what shows judgment rather than instinct. Then we are moving to next scene, that is step number 6. Choose, justify, systematize, commit. Examiners reward a clear owned decision over fence sitting, and they can tell the difference between balance and evasion. Justify the choice on the triple test, not on how it makes you feel. Then close on the systemic fix, whether or not it was asked. What institutional change, a disclosure requirement, a protection mechanism, a standing protocol, a separation of functions would stop the next officer facing this dilemma at all. This is the move that lifts an answer from personal heroics to governance. And it is the single most reliable way to add marks to a competent answer. So the whole engine in one line, and it is worth memorizing. Role and decision, stakeholders, conflicts, options, legal, ethical, workable, owned choice, plus systemic fix. This is the whole engine in one line. As far as case study is concerned, and how to write the case study, and this is the case study structure. When the triple test breaks, there is one family of cases where step 5 does not run, and you need to know it in advance because it appears often. The triple test assumes ethical and workable can point the same way. In rule versus compassion cases, they do not. The compassion option is unlawful and the lawful option is cruel. A destitute woman with no documents, a dying patient, and a rule about where blood may come from, a bank manager and a colleague's father who needs surgery tomorrow. Ticking, is it legal? And a case like that produces a heartless answer. Ignoring the box produces a lawless one. So you have to use this ladder instead. What is the ladder? The first thing is, does the rule actually forbid this? Or have I assumed it does? Most of these cases dissolve here. Welfare rules routinely contain relaxation clauses, exceptional hardship provisions, and emergency powers that officers have never read to the end. Check before you organize. And the second one, Is there a lawful route to the same human account? Is there a lawful route to the same human outcome? A different provision, a higher authority who can authorize an emergency channel, an alternative resource. The examiner is watching whether you looked. Third one, if not, if not, what is the smallest deviation? On record, escalated, never concealed, not the most convenient deviation, the smallest one that solves the immediate harm. Documented contemporaneously with your reasons, reported upward at once and taken in your name. In your name. So fourth one, what prospective fix stops the next person depending on my kindness? This is where the marks concentrate, and it is the step that turns a sympathetic answer into an administrative one. So the governing sentence for this whole family, the difference between using discretion the rule already contains and bending a rule in secret is disclosure. Compassion exercised openly on record with reasons is administration. Compassion exercised in secret with other people's resources is how good people begin frauds. Aristotle named this 2000 years ago, and Unit 6 have gave you the word ipikia. Equity as the correction of law, where law being general fails a particular case, you have to use it. You have to use it. So the budget, the part nobody teaches. You can know the engine perfectly and still lose 20 marks to arithmetic. So do the arithmetic now. So do the arithmetic now. Once you and never again in the hall. So what are the numbers? The numbers 250 marks, 180 minutes, roughly 0.7 minutes per mark. Section A, 13 parts into 10 marks into 150 words. About 6 to 7 minutes each. And comes to section B, 6 cases into 20 marks each, 250 words each, about 30 minutes each case study or case. So 3 minutes reading and planning. In 13 minutes, 3 minutes reading and planning, 10 minutes writing per case, 250 words. So sub questions run 2 to 4, roughly 60 to 125 words per part. So read the last line again, like a sub questions run 2 to 4, roughly 60 to 125 words part, because it is the instruction that changes how you write. Nothing since 2022 has asked 5. At 4 parts, you have about 60 words each, which is one tight paragraph. At 4 parts, you have about 60 words each, which is one tight paragraph. There is no room to walk the examiner through 6 engine steps and then answer the question. So here is the governing instruction of this entire unit. Run the full engine in your head every time. Write only the steps the paper asked for. The engine is the thinking you do in the margin. The sub questions are the writing plan. The engine is the thinking you do in the margin. Margin. The sub questions are in the writing plan. The sub questions are the writing plan. The margin plan. 3 minutes physically before writing a word. Put this in the margin. It takes 90 seconds with the practice, and it is the difference between a structured answer and a wandering one. So R/D/C. Your role, the decision point, the clock. A short stakeholder list with a star against the silent ones. The collision written as pair, two words with an arrow between them, three options, one word each. Then number the sub questions and write your word allocation beside each. Let's say example A, sub question A 70, B 60, C 60, and D 60. And when the sub question is not a decision, now write, now write, and when the sub question, now write, and when the sub question is not a decision. When the sub question is not a decision, unit 1 gave you the 4 types of the engine does not answer, and this is where they bite. About 40% of recent sub questions are not asking you to decide anything. Persuasion. What arguments? Persuasion. Persuasion means what? What arguments will you put forth to convince them? You are arguing to a named audience. Identify what that audience care about and argue in their currency, not yours. And then second one, domain measures. What precautions should the police take? Describe 4 laws. A knowledge question in a case study quote. Compact list. One class of relevance each exactly the number asked. No engine. Worth having ready because the 2023 paper asked it, and the correct answer has recently changed. 4 laws providing a healthy, safe and equitable working environment for women. Sexual Harassment of Women at Workplace, Prevention, Prohibition and Redressal Act 2013, Internal Committee, Time-bound Inquiry, Protection from Retaliation, the Code on Social Security 2020, Maternity Benefit and Creche Provision, the Code on Wages 2019, no discrimination on grounds of sex in wages or recruitment for the same work, and the Occupational Safety, Health and Work Conditions Code 2020, working hours, night work with consent, and safeguards and welfare facilities. So you have to note carefully because the catches people out. The 4 labor codes came into force in November 2025, repealing 29 central statutes. The Maternity Benefit Act, the Equal Remuneration Act, and the Factories Act have been subsumed naming item. Subsumed naming them now is a naming repealed law. The 2013 Harassment Act is the exception. It stands separately and is unaffected. A safe closing line that shows currency. The framework was consolidated into our codes, 4 codes, with state rules still being notified, so implementation rather than legislation in now binding constraint. Diagnostic. How the medical ethics compromised here. Name the mechanism of the compromise. Do not solve it. You are asked. You are not asked. So zoom out. How can data ethics have? How can data ethics save humanity at large? Leave the case answer at the level of the principle. and written in one closing line so the examiner sees you knew you had left. So wise and two habits that separate high scores. Write as the officer. First person where the question invites it, I would, not the officer should. You are being tested an administrative maturity, and maturity needs as someone willing to own a decision rather than describe one from outside. So habit one, decisive with humility. Take a clear stand and acknowledge the cost of the path you did not take. Ethics is choosing the better option, not pretending the other one had no merit. An answer that admits the chosen course has price reads as considered. One that presents it as costless reads as naive. Habit 2, anchor in the real. Name the actual safeguard, recusal, asset declaration, the internal committee, written record of an oral instruction, escalation to a named authority, following proper procedure is a phrase that means nothing. The specific mechanism it what ends the mark exactly in the theory half, and a warning that applies to almost every case. Resignation is not the brave choice, it is usually the abdicating one. It hands the institution to the wrongdoer and removes the only person in the room who objected. An answer that resigns in paragraph one has usually failed. Resignation is a last resort after lawful means are exhausted, never a strategy. Never preachy, never absolutist. You are not delivering a sermon to the examiner. You are showing how you would carry a difficult decision through a real institution with real constraints. When you are not an officer, when you are not an officer, 1 in 5 cases puts you outside government, and in 2024, half the paper did not a chief executive, a hospital manager, a research scientist. The engine runs unchanged. The vocabulary does not, and this is where candidates give themselves away by recommending recusal to a civil services board that does not exist in a company. In government, recusal and escalation to a neutral authority. In company, recusal and referral to the board are a disinterested director. In government, vigilance and the anti-corruption bureau. In a company, the audit committee, internal and statutory auditors. Comes to the government, whistleblower protection under service rules. In a company, the whistle mechanism, protection from retaliation. Comes to government part, public interest and exchequer. Public interest and the exchequer. Comes to company part, shareholder duty and the wider stakeholder interest. In government, RTI, audit, legislative oversight. Comes to company, regulatory disclosure and periodic reporting. Comes to government, fixed tenure transfer as pressure. In company, employment security dismissal as pressure. And one substantive difference, not merely a vocabulary one. A private manager has a duty to shareholders that a public servant does not have to anyone equivalent. That does not license harm. But an answer that treats a chief executive as though profit were simply though profit were simply an illegitimate consideration has misread the role. The obligation is that profit is pursued within the limits, not that it is ignored. What are the pitfalls collected? Listing virtues. The 8 pitfalls. Listing virtues instead of naming the collision. solving a problem. The case did not ask about the commonest cause of a competent answer scoring badly. And third one, the fantasy option, and it is cousin the fantasy option, and its cousin, the false binary, convicting the accused on the strength of the case's own narrative without inquiry, resigning or requesting a transfer and calling it courage, omitting the system fix, omitting the systemic fix, which is free marks in almost every case, writing six engine steps when the paper asked three questions, running the engine on a sub question that wanted list, the frames and what replaces them here. Every theory unit in this marathon ends by naming of the four section which of the four section A frames its questions have historically demanded. This unit ends differently, and the difference is worth stating plainly. Section B has no quotation, no distinguish, no enumerate and justify, and no design measure, and no design a measure. The four frames do not operate here at all. What replaces them is the sub question type, and there are five. The decision family: issues, options, evaluation, choice, systemic measures, which the engine answers in full, and which is about 60% of recent subparts. And the four the engine does not answer: persuasion, domain measure, a diagnostic, zoom out, recognizing which one you are looking at before you write a word does exactly what the frames do you in section A. It decides the shape of the answer before you know any of the content. Everything in the theory until everything in the theory units is tested here, and only here, in the form that finally matters. Constitutional morality shows up in the development and rights cases. Conflict of interest is its own archetype. The law versus conscience gap runs through the whistleblower and crisis cases. Emotional intelligence decides the disaster and harassment ones. The thinkers are lenses you reach for when you need to justify choice in one sentence. And if you have come to this unit first, nothing here depends on those units having been done. The engine runs on its own. They deepen it rather than enable it. Case studies are not a separate subject. They are everything already revised, asked the only question that ultimately matters. What would you do and why? Unit 11 takes 7 recurring situations so that when an unseen case opens in front of you, you already know it's a shape. It's already knows it's a shape. We discussed till now decision family, persuasion, domain measures, diagnostics, zoom out. So we are moving to the next chapter, that is unit 11. Those are 7 archetypes. So 78 case studies have been set between 2013 and 2025. The surface stories are all different: a blank, a landslide, a tire contract, a border at midnight. The situations underneath them are not. Seven recurring situations account for about 7 in 10 of them. And I want to be precise about that number rather than overstate it, because you will read elsewhere that every case maps onto a small set of archetypes, counted case by case. It does not. Roughly 3 in 10 are blends of two archetypes or belong to Smaller families we will name at the end. That is not a problem. The engine from unit 10 runs on all of them. The archetype is a shortcut, not a straight jacket. So what the shortcut buys you is time. Name the archetype in the first 30 seconds and you already know the likely conflicts, the shape of the options, and the systemic fix before you have read the sub questions. In a 30-minute answer, that is worth three of them. So what are those? The seven, the seven with their counts. 78 cases in 2013 to 2025 counted, not asserted. These are the seven archetypes. Seven archetypes. The first one, whistleblower or report suppression. Till now, 12 cases asked from 2013 to 2025. Most frequently asked this archetype. Then second one, conflict of interest or quid pro quo. Second most highest cases, 9. The third one, disaster and crisis under pressure, 8 times, 8 cases asked so far. Then corruption and confrontation, 7 case studies. Development versus environment or displacement, this is 6 times, 6 cases. Harassment versus harassment slash hostile workplace, 6 times, 6 cases. Rules for compassion, 6 cases. So these are all seven archetypes. Whistleblower, report suppression, and conflict of interest or quid pro quo, disaster or crisis under pressure, corruption, confrontation, development versus environment or displacement, harassment or hostile workplace, and rule versus compassion. So in 78 cases, these seven types from 2013 to 2025 asked. These are the seven archetypes. So we have to understand every case study under these seven archetypes. So comes to the archetype one, that is whistleblower and report suppression. What is the whistleblower and report suppression? The most frequent situation in the corpus and the one to prepare most thoroughly. You hold evidence of wrongdoing. Disclosing it puts your career, posting or safety at risk. Suppressing it easy and nobody would immediately know. Finding that should shape every answer in this family. In most of these cases, the pressure comes from the directly above you. Your reporting officer, your chairman, your reporting officer, your chairman, the person who writes your appraisal. That is why expose it immediately is usually the wrong first move. The person you would be reporting is often the person the reporting channel runs through. So the full model answer, the 2023 state road transport case, the archetype one worked in three options and the triple test. So what is this? We are going to discuss. The case is what? The full model answer, the 2023 state road transport case. The case condensed here. You are an honest IAS officer recently posted as managing director of a state road transport corporation. So you are an honest IAS officer recently posted as managing director of a state road transport corporation. Your sixth transfer in 3 years. The chairman is a powerful politician close to the chief minister. A board member from the opposition hands you documents and video appearing to show the chairman demanding a bribe on a tire supply order. He is plainly using you. He hints that exposing the chairman will bring you recognition, and that when his party comes to power, your career will be secure. If you act, you may be penalized and transferred again. Here, two sub questions. Evaluate the options available to you as a conscientious civil servant and comment on the ethical issues arising from the politicization of the bureaucracy. So, what is the framing here? As managing director, my duty runs to the corporation and the public exchequer, not to either politician. The case sets a specific trap here. The evidence appears credible, but the messenger is compromised. The discipline is to separate the validity of the evidence from the motive of its source. If the corruption is real, it must be acted upon. The political game around it must not capture the decision. This is the discipline. And stakeholders. The public whose money the tire spends, the corporation as an institution, the chairman who is entitled to inquiry rather than trial by leaked video, the board member, an interested party, myself and my family facing another transfer, and every officer who will inherit the precedent I set here. So comes to the ethical issues as conflicts. Duty to act on credible evidence of corruption against the risk of becoming an instrument of partisan politics, probity and public interest against personal career security. The integrity of due process, evidence verified, not weaponized, against the temptation of a quick and applauded exposure, and beneath all of it, the tension the second sub question names, the independence of the permanent executive against its capture by the political one. So this is the thing. This is the case. That is the question, and those are the source. Those are the stakeholders, issues, and ethical issues, etc. Then option A, first, suppress it, suppress it, stay silent, protect the posting. Legal, inaction on credible evidence may itself breach my duty. Non-performance is to form of corruption. Ethical, no, it makes me complicit. Workable, superficially safe, and it leaves me compromised and available for the next demand. Reject. Then option B, go public immediately with the material. Legal, acting on corruption is right, but acting on unverified leaked material outside process is hasty and possibly defamatory. Ethical, right cause, wrong method, and I would be doing precisely what a partisan actor wants. Lending the office to his campaign workable. Lending this, lending the office to his campaign. And third one, workable. It invites the charge of political motivation, which would discredit the exposure itself. Reject as a first move. Then option C, route it through the institutional channel, verify the material to the extent I can, place the matter on official record, refer it to the competent investigating authority rather than to press or the opposition, recuse the chairman from related financial decisions pending inquiry, document each step. Legal, yes, this is the lawful route. Ethical, yes, it acts on the corruption without prejudging guilt and without serving any party. Workable, the most defensible of the three, precisely because it is procedural rather than theoretical. Theatrical, choose this. That is the reasoned choice. Option C honors the duty to act while refusing to let the office be captured by either the chairman's power or the board member's ambition. If having done this correctly, I am transferred. That is the price of integrity discharged through proper means, and it is defensible with silence and a partisan exposure or not. Resignation is not warranted. Leaving would surrender the institution to the wrongdoing rather than confront it. On politicization, the second sub question, a healthy system rests on permanent executive that advises and implements with neutrality, and a political executive that sets policy, each respecting the other's domain. Politicization corrodes that. Officers are rewarded for loyalty rather than merit. Transfer becomes an instrument of pressure rather than administration. And the civil servant's anchor shifts from constitutional values to individual patterns. The consequences are concrete. Yes, the consequences are concrete. Impartiality erodes. Upright officers are demoralized or sidelined, and decisions follow political calculus rather than public interest. The detail the case give you is doing work here. Six transfers in 3 years is not a career pattern, it is a message. Systemic fix. The durable answer is institutional rather than personal. Fixed minimum tenure for sensitive posts, a transparent civil services board for postings and transfers, whistleblower protection that is genuinely safe to use, so that reporting wrongdoing does not require career martyrdom, and a clear separation between the officer's duty to the office and any individual's political fortunes. Probity has to be protected by systems so that doing the right thing does not depend on one person's willingness to be punished for it. So that is the whole engine. That is the whole engine. Visible role and decision, stakeholders, conflicts, options on the triple test, owned choice, systemic fix. Every skeleton below reproduces this shape. Pitfalls in the in this archetype, what are the pitfalls? Jumping to expose immediately. Jumping to expose immediately without verifying the evidence or noticing the messenger's motive. The case usually plants a compromised source precisely to test this. And the two questions, is the evidence valid and why this person giving it to me, have to be answered separately. Then second pitfall, treating resignation as the brave choice. It is usually the abdicating choice. The brave choice is to act correctly through proper means and accept the consequences of having done so. Then third pitfall, forgetting due process for the accused. Even a corrupt seeming chairman is entitled to inquiry, not trial by leak. Then fourth one, missing the systemic half. What is the missing the systemic half? Whistleblowers protection, fixed tenure, a transparent civil services board. That is where the politicization half of the question is really answered, and the answer that stops at the personal choice has left those marks on the table. So here the case plans compromised precisely to be tested. So these are the pitfalls, what losses marks, and why. Then we are moving to second archetype, that is conflict of interest and quid pro quo. Representative cases, a road realignment routed towards a minister's farmhouse with the land offered in your wife's name 2018. Sneha Heading Hospital procurement, whose brother is a well-known supplier and has submitted an expression of interest 2024 asked. Subhash Secretary PWD, whose only son is in real estate and wants the location of an unannounced mega road project, while the minister has separately introduced his own nephew. This is 2025 question. So the defining feature, personal or family gain is available in exchange for bending or merely for sharing an official decision. This is conflict of interest or quid pro quo. Note that the 2025 case involves no bribe at all. The son asks only for information, and the father is not doing anything wrong by his own account. That is the sophistication of the modern version. So, conflicts, official duty against family obligation, public interest, lower cost, fair process, minimum displacement against private gain, the appearance of impropriety, the appearance of impropriety against actual impropriety. And here you must stress that perceived conflict damages the institution even where the outcome was fair. And legally as cover against ethics, the land purchase is technically legal, is a sentence these cases are built around. So comes to the stakeholders, the exchequer, the honest competitor who loses the tender are the farmers who land is realigned into. The institution's credibility, the official and the family member and the person applying the pressure, name the silent laws or explicitly. Options: comply quietly, legal veneer, unethical and unworkable because it makes you permanently blackmailable, refuse but say nothing, better and it leaves the proposal alive for your successor, refuse, disclose, recuse, document, escalate, the sequence from unit 7, then decline, record the approach in writing, recuse yourself for the conflicted party, refer to the neutral authority, legal, ethical, workable, choose. These are all the cases from the modern version asks for nothing. In discuss, the 2025 case involves no bribe at all. The son asks only for information and father is not doing anything wrong by his account. Here the sequence we discussed. So comply quietly, legal, ethical, workable, choose. Then systemic fix, mandatory asset and interest declarations, recusal norms, a conflict of interest register, transparent tendering with published evaluation criteria, information security protocols for pre-announcement project data, and protection for the officer who refuses assures pressure and protection for the officer who refuses pressure. Comes to pitfalls, accepting the it is legal framing, accepting the it is legal framing, refusing the favor but still personally deciding the conflicted matter, refusal without recusal is incomplete, forgetting that a perceived conflict is a real one, offering no systemic safeguard. Then comes to archetype 3. What is the archetype 3? Disaster, crisis, under pressure. Second one, conflict of interest and quid pro quo. This is the third archetype, that is disaster and crisis under pressure. 2024 question, Rohit and 500 women, 2025 Vijay, 2025 Ashok at the border. So these are the cases. Here representative cases. Rohit, an SP who has apprehended 10 hardcore Naxalites, now surrendered by 500 agitated tribal women, demanding their release with his superior unreachable. This is 2024 question. Then Vijay, a deputy commissioner running a cloudburst relief in which 200 people have died, receiving news that his mother has died in Kerala. This is the 2025. Then Ashok, a divisional commissioner facing 250 people at the border, some injured, including 10 armed soldiers in uniform, with the Home Secretary unreachable, 2025. These three representative cases. The defining feature is what here? Time pressure, no clean option. And in every one of these, the case deliberately removes your ability to seek orders. Because poor connectivity, inclement weather, night, the detail is not scenery. It is the examiner telling you that differing is not available, and you must decide. So what is the conflict? What are the conflicts here? Firmness against the prevention of a worse tragedy, immediate safety against the legal exposure of yourself and your team, personal claim against public duty, most sharply in the 2025 Vijay case, where nothing is corrupt and nobody is at fault. And in the border case, security obligation against humanitarian duty. So, what are the options here? With the crisis waiting, rigid protocol following, legal, often ethically indefensible if it costs a life that could have been saved, and frequently unworkable in the moment. Act to resolve the immediate danger with safeguards. Act to resolve the immediate danger with safeguards. De-escalate, separate, evacuate, provide medical aid, and document the necessity. Document the necessity contemporaneously. Differ and seek orders. Differ and seek orders legitimate only if the clock allows. Which in these cases it usually does not. And the Vijay case specifically, because candidates get it badly wrong in both directions. An answer that abandons the district reads as unfit for the role. An answer that refuses to acknowledge the loss reads as emotional immaturity dressed as dedication, and examiners say so. The mature course delegates to competent. The mature course delegates to a competent deputy, stabilizes the acute phase, communicates honestly with the state government, and then attends to the death, neither abandoning the district nor denying one's own humanity. Say both halves. So, what is the systemic fix here? Pre-authorized, pre-authorized emergency protocols with decision rights, devolved connectivity blackouts, good faith legal protection for field officers and medical teams acting in emergency, standing crowd, standing crowd management and gender sensitive protocols for protest involving women, trained reserve teams, and second in command with delegated authority. So no district dependence depends on one person being reachable. So what we discussed so far in these cases, 2025 Vijay cases, what? Cloudburst relief, 200 dead, and news that his mother has died. We have to work on both halves. Candidates get this wrong in both directions. An answer that abandons district reads as unfit for the role. This is one thing. An answer that refuses to acknowledge loss reads as emotional immaturity, dressed as dedication, and examiner says so. So the mature course delegates contempt, deputy stabilizes acute phase, and communicates honestly with the state government and attend to the death, neither abandoning the district or denying one's humanity. So you have to work on say both halves. Have to balance. Then moving to the fourth archetype, that is corruption, confrontation. Corruption. Fourth archetype is what? Corruption and confrontation. What are the representative cases? 2021, Sunil and the Sand Mafia. 2022, the Stone Mafia journalist. And 2025, the Panchayat. What are the representative cases? Sunil against illegal sand mining operation with threats reaching his family. 2021 case. A journalist told to drop a stone mafia story. This is 2022 case. And SP in prohibition state facing illicit distillation rooted in local poverty. That is 2018. And the systems version, a new administration, and the systems version, a new administrator inheriting a panchayat where the predecessor has run ghost beneficiaries, false muster rolls, and approved works that never existed. This asked in 2025. The defining feature and how it differs from archetype 1. Here the wrongdoing is open and organized rather than a single hidden act. It usually has political patronage and the threat is to life rather than to career. The answer needs both a courage dimension and a strategy dimension. Both are in need. Defense alone is naive and the case rewards a layered approach. So what are the options? Go slow under threat, unethical, an abdication, and it emboldens the operation. Acknowledge the fear honestly rather than pretending it way. Acknowledge the fear honestly rather than pretending it away. An answer that never registers the danger reads as unserious. A reckless solo crackdown, courageous and naive, and it may fail without backup. That is 100% fact. Or the layered course. What is the layered course? Secure and document the evidence first. Report upward through honest channels. So a record exists that protects you. Request security for self and family through proper channels. Clean the internal collusion among your own staff and address the socio-economic roots that supply the operation with labor. The half of the marks most candidates miss. The 2018 and 2019 cases deliberately shows that the illegal economy grows out of local poverty. Pure enforcement treats the symptom and the poor people working in it are victims as much as instruments. An answer that is only law and order has answered half the question. What is the systemic fix here? Officers and witness protection, fixed tenure, fixed tenure, enforcement task force insulated from local capture, internal vigilance to break staff collusion, real-time digital audit and reconciliation in fund disbursement system, and a livelihood alternatives that dry up the labor. So this is the regarding archetype 4, and then we are moving to archetype 5, that is development versus environment and displacement, that is development against environment. What are the representative cases? 2025 forest land for the homeless, and 2018 the chemical plant, and 2024 farmers against industry. Forest land proposed for housing the homeless in an ecologically sensitive zone, with the administration arguing it fulfills a constitutional obligation. This asked in 2025. Closure of polluting chemical plant that is also the area's main employer. This question asked in 2018. This is the case. And farmers denied irrigation while industry draws heavily from the same aquifer, with the district facing a drinking water crisis. This is asked 2024. What is the defining feature here? Two legitimate goods in collision. There is no villain to expose, and the 2025 case is the hardest version, precisely because the competing claim is shelter for the economically weaker sections with a constitutional obligation and not a developer's profit. An answer that frames is as greed against nature as misread the case. Comes to conflicts, intergenerational justice, present need against future sustainability. Then comes to distributive justice, who bears the cost and who takes the benefit, which in these cases is almost always the poor bearing and others taking. Livelihood against health and ecology, legality of clearance against ethics of consequence. So the move that lifts the answer. So concede both claims fully, then attack the assumed necessity of the trade-off. It is the only available land. Has a genuine alternative assessment been done? What does the forest currently provide to the tribal and nomadic communities? The case names, and lean on irreversibility as the ethical asymmetry. Housing can be built later somewhere else. Old growth forest and an aquifer cannot be rebuilt at all. So, what are the systemic fix? Honest cost benefit accounting that prices ecological and social costs. Pre, prior, and informed consent for affected communities. Rehabilitation built on livelihood restoration rather than one time cash. Siting on degraded or non forest land and compact development to cut the land footprint. Cumulative impact assessment across a region rather than a project by project. A correction if you have older material. The dam in a forested tribal valley is often listed among these cases. It is not a case study, it is a 10 marker section, a questions from 2018. Useful as an illustration, do not cite as section be present here. Then archetype 6, harassment and hostile workplace. This is representative cases. Seema, a highly qualified new senior architect systematically humiliated by an insecure chief architect 6 months from retirement, now contemplating resignation, while you as an additional director general need both the project completed and SEMA retained. This question asked, this case study asked in 2023. A star performer harassing a colleague who resigns rather than a complaint. This is 2013 case. And a company pressuring a complainant to withdraw. 2019. What is the defining feature here? Misconduct complicated by a power asymmetry. The wrongdoer is senior, valuable, or protected. The person harmed is vulnerable or about to leave. What is the duty here? To act collides with organizational evidence. The duty to act collides with organizational evidence. The duty to act collides with organizational convenience, not evidence. Comes to conflict spot, a duty to protect dignity against project deadlines and the protection of a valuable performer. Justice for the complaint begin against deference to a senior. The bystander's responsibility. Silence is complicity. Again is the cost of speaking. And due process for the accused against the urgency of protecting the person being harmed. What are the options here? Treat it as personality clash and manage around it. This is the tempting option and it is a failure one. It teaches the organization that seniority purchases impunity, move the complainant, feels protective, penalizes the victim, or act through process with protection, engage the internal committee, separate reporting lines so the accused does not control the complainant's work or appraisal, support the person harmed and proceed and evidence against the accused. The 2023 case wants both outcomes explicitly. The project completed and SEMA retained. Say, so you have to say how. Reassign the reporting relationship rather than the person. Give SEMA formal ownership of the contribution the chief architect is anxious about and address the underlying insecurity directly with him. Correction rather than impunity and correction rather than expulsion. So what are the systemic fix? What is that? A functioning internal committee with a genuinely independent external member, anti-retaliation protection and confidential reporting route that does not run through the accused. So what is the systemic fix? I am repeating again. A functioning internal committee with a genuinely independent external member, anti-retaliation protection, and a confidential reporting route that does not run through the accused. Separation of the appraisal relationship during an inquiry and a cultural audit that goes beyond a tick box workshop. So this is regarding archetype 6, harassment and hostile workplace. This is one of the important archetype, harassment and hostile workplace. Here there is no villain, nobody is corrupt, nobody is under threat. There is only a rule. A person is in front of you, and the fact that following the rule will hurt them. So move to seventh archetype. Archetype 7, the most distinctively GS4 situation in the corpus and least well prepared. So what is the archetype 7? Rule versus comparison. The most distinctively GS4 situation in the whole corpus. And one least well prepared. There is no villain, nobody is corrupt, nobody is under threat. There is only a rule. A person is in front of you, and the fact that following the rule will hurt them. What are the representative cases? A destitute woman who satisfies every condition for relief expected, that she has no documents. This question asked in 2016. An old couple who fail only the reserved category criteria. This asked in 2018. A bank manager who released 10 lakh rupees from a dormant account to pay for a colleague's father's heart surgery confidentially on a promise of repayment, 2023 question. And the sharpest of them all, that is Uttarkashi. What is the Uttarkashi case? This is worked. A landslide at midnight in a hamlet 60 kilometers from Uttarkashi. You are district magistrate on the ground with doctors, NGOs. You are the district magistrate on the ground with doctors, NGOs, media, and police. A man runs to you. His wife in labor and losing. His wife in labor and losing blood. Your medical team confirms she needs transfusion now. Blood collection bags and blood group test kits are in the ambulance. Some of your team have already volunteered to donate. You are an AIMS graduate, so you know transfusion blood must come through the recognized blood bank. Your team is divided. The doctors will proceed provided they are not penalized. So, what is the thing here? The governing insight. What is the governing insight? The exam is not testing whether you will break the rule. It is testing whether you know what the rule is for. Blood bank licensing is not bureaucratic obstruction. It exists because untested blood transmits HIV, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C, malaria, and syphilis. And a reaction from an unscreened unit can kill faster than hemorrhage will. So, a candidate who transfuses without naming the infection risk has not read the case. A candidate who refuses without naming the evacuation options has not read it either. So now run the ladder from unit 10. The first thing is know what the rule is for. One, does rule actually forbid this? Or there is an emergency provision I have not read? So know what the rule is for. And the second one, is there a lawful route to the same outcome? Look for the lawful route. Helicopter services are already operating in this scenario. Telephonic authorization from the state health authority, a mobile collection unit called forward, and the detail this case plans deliberately. You have blood group kits, which is not the same thing as infection screening. So naming the gap is the difference between a calculated risk and a blind one. Then third one is name the gap in the case plans. If not the smallest deviation, screen to the fullest extent the available kits allow. Take written informed consent from the patient and husband. Document precisely what was and was not tested. Report in writing to the state health authority at once and record the decision in your own. In that point, most candidates miss entirely. The doctors will act provided they are not penalized. You cannot lawfully indemnify them, and you must pretend you can. What you can do is take the decision in your own name and in writing. So the professional risk sits with the person holding the authority rather than the person holding the needle. An answer that quietly accepts the doctor's condition has failed the case, even if it reaches the right outcome. The fourth one is prospective fix, where the marks concentrate, screened units and rapid screening kits pre-positioned in district disaster stores. A standing emergency transfusion protocol notified in advance so the next district magistrate is not improvising at midnight. And a call out arrangement with the nearest licensed blood bank written into the district disaster plan. So contrast with the bank manager and teach them as a pair. So there the kindness was real, the act was still indefensible. And the reason was the secrecy, not the outcome. A depositor's money was lent without consent, with no record and no recourse had repayment failed. Compassion exercised in secret with the others, compassion exercised in secret with other people's resources, how good people being frauds. Here a deviation may well be defensible because it can be disclosed, documented, and escalated. The difference between using discretion, the rule already contains, and bending a rule in secret is disclosure. So beyond the seven, the three smaller families, about 3 in 10 cases sit outside all seven. Two lines each is enough, but recognize them so you are not searching for an archetype that is not there. The social conflict, personal versus professional, the policy case. Social conflict and community resistance, child labor sustained by a whole local economy, a village boycotting a school for girls, a community refusing a Dalit cook's midday meal. The distinguishing feature is that the resistance is collective and the officer cannot simply enforce against a whole population. The answer needs persuasion, local allies, and incremental compliance alongside the legal position. Coercion alone converts one problem into two. So, this is regarding the social conflict. Then moving to personal versus professional. Rashika, a joint secretary, deciding where the reasonable limits of work ethics lie when her children are raised by domestic helper. This is 2023. A parent whose 11-year-old son is bullied, who then posts a counter video on social media. This 2023 case. Vijay's bereavement 2025. Note that in the first of these, there is no wrongdoing anywhere in the case. Nobody has done anything improper, and candidates who go hunting for a villain write a bad answer. The ethical content is the legitimacy of limits and the institutional duty to make sustainable demands. The policy case with no personal dilemma at all. This is the third one. Archetype. This is the 10th archetype, more or less. With no personal dilemma at all. 2024 gave a director general facing recruitment of 2024 gave a director general facing recruitment of unemployed graduates by a terrorist group through social media and asked for options, measures to strengthen the setup and an action plan for intelligence gathering. Nothing collides for the officer. This is a policy problem and the engine produces very little for it. Answer it as options, risk, recommendation, and then supply the part that makes it as GS4 answer rather than a GS3 one. Proportionately proportionately due process, and the civil liberties cost of surveillance falling on a community rather than on individuals. A candidate who writes only counter radicalization measures has written the right answer in the wrong paper. Comes to the under the clock. Three habits. Three habits. One, name the archetype first before writing. Decide which situation you are in. A blend of two just means running two sets of conflicts through the same engine. The first one is under the clock, three habits. In this, what to do in the first 30 seconds every time. The first thing, name the archetype first. Before writing, decide which situation you are in. A blend of two just means running two sets of conflicts through the same engine. It does not change anything else. And pair it within the other recognition step from unit 10, which of the five sub question types each part is asked for. Each part is what? Asking for. The archetype tells you the content. The sub question type tells you the shape. The second one, the engine never changes, only the weighting does. In crisis case, the clock and life safety dominate. In a development case, the conflicts and the systemic fix carry the marks. In a conflict of interest case, disclose recused document differ is the spine. In a rule versus compassion case, use the ladder instead of the triple test. Same engine but different emphasis. The third one, decide then build the system. Two things reliably separate high scorers, and owned justified choice rather than fence sitting or instant resignation, and a systemic fix that converts personal virtue into institutional safeguard. So end on the system, not on the self. So you have to end on the system, not on the self. Everything in the theory unit surface here. Constitutional morality in the development and rights cases. Conflict of interest as its own archetype. The law versus conscience gap is the whistleblower, and the rule versus compassion families. Emotional intelligence in the disaster and harassment cases. The thinkers as lenses you reach for when a choice needs justifying in one sentence, like Gandhi's talisman, Rawls on the least advantaged, Aristotle on equity. And if you have met this unit before those, nothing here depends on them. The archetypes and the engine stand on their own. The theory deepens the answers rather than unlocking them. Unit 12 is where the clock goes on all of it. Not a better officer, but a system in which a worse officer would still have done the right thing. Not a better officer, but a system in which a worse officer would still have done the right thing. So this is regarding the case studies. In the next class, we are going to discuss another things. That is fourth video. In the next class, we are going to discuss. Thank you.